All right. All right. Good morning. I'm Nancy Moore. I'm the facilitator for today. Um, this is Erace, um, and I need to start by reading our slogan, which is Erace is the slogan of the group Erace, which was formed in New Orleans in the summer of 1993. We seek ways through person to person
Becky, should I
communication
go in the other room?
I got it, Nancy.
to show we are committed to treating all human beings with love, respect, empathy, compassion, and humility. Join us. Erase is an organization that does not espouse any political party, and we have no religious affiliation. We believe in acceptance of all people, and no personal attacks of any kind will be tolerated. We come with the intention to listen, learn, and not to argue. Okay, next I will read our land acknowledgement. We begin today by acknowledging that what we know as the United States is the ancestral and unceded territory of many indigenous peoples, and that there are many more nations and tribes that could be named here. Members of our meeting group today are on the lands of the Chitimacha, the Choctaw in New Orleans, the Creeks and Cherokees in Atlanta, the Takawan, the Lipan, the Apache and Comanche in Austin, the Lenape and Piscataway in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, the Wampanoag and Nipmuc peoples in Boston, the Kahlua and Mojave in Riverside, and the Lumbee in Fayetteville. We thank their ancestors for being stewards of these lands through the generation and through today. And we need to protect and honor the history and people of these places. Despite centuries of colonial theft and violence, we should always remember that we are still on indigenous land and it will always be indigenous land. Okay, I'm gonna go around as I see you in the order on my screen and have everyone give a brief introduction, your name and where you're located and how long you've been coming to Erace. So I will start with Phyllis.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Phyllis. I'm in New Orleans, and I've been coming to Erace since 2008. Thank you.
Thank you. Marva.
Good morning. I'm Marva. I'm located in the New Orleans area, and I've been coming to Erase post Katrina.
Thank you, Marva. Louise.
Hi, I've been coming to Erace for over 25 years, on and off. First in New Orleans, now I'm in Austin.
Thank you. Marion.
Good morning again, everybody. Marion, and I'm here in New Orleans. I have been attending the Erase discussions since June of 1993. In fact, I went to the very first Erase meeting that was held at the Broadmoor Library, Uptown.
Thank you, Marion. Marla.
Hey, good morning. I'm Marla. I've been coming to Erace, I think, since around 2019-ish, and I'm in Metairie, which is in the New Orleans area.
Thank you, Marla. Beatrice.
Hi, good morning. I'm Beatrice. I'm in East Point, Georgia, which is right outside of Atlanta, and I've been coming to Erace since about 1993. I may have been there with Marion at the first meeting.
Great. Thank you, Beatrice. Walterine. Unmute Walterine.
Here we go. Sorry about that. My name is Walterine. I'm in New Orleans. And to be honest with you, I forgot how long I've been coming. I think it's been like 2016, 2015, somewhere like that. And been off and on for the last, I guess, I did not attend for 3 months because of COVID. and because of my husband's illness and stuff. But anyway, I was glad to be back. I have been listening to the videos, the YouTube videos, and it's been very interesting to say the least. Thank you.
Thank you, Walterine. Jean?
I'm a little slow these days. I'm Jean Walker. I'm in Silver Spring, Maryland, which is just outside Washington, D.C. And I've been coming, I think, for about 2 years now. I don't know why I just have problems remembering dates at my age. It all blends in together. Anyway, I'm happy to be here again today.
Thank you, Jean. Leonetta?
My name is Lynetta. I'm in New Orleans, and I've been a member of Erace since I was an intern working on my undergrad.
Thank you. Cindy?
Good morning, everybody. I've missed the last few meetings because we were traveling. And we're not home yet, but we're getting closer. It's nice to see your faces. I was surprised what a gap in my life when you guys were in my life. So thanks for being back, and we'll be home in about 2 days. Take care.
All right. Thank you, Cindy. Stanton?
Good morning, Stanton in Austin, and I've been coming for about 1.5 years.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Stephanie. I'm outside of Atlanta, and I've been coming, I think, since 2020.
Thank you. Pedro?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Large group. Good to see. I've been coming for the last 3 or so years.
Okay, thank you. Teresa?
Good morning, I'm Teresa. I'm in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I've been coming since last August.
Thank you. Bill?
I am Bill Ives, and I'm not in New Orleans now, but Cindy stayed at the home. Can you hear echo?
No, there's no echo.
Good. So we're at the home of Becky Richardson, and she will be joining us soon at a new home. And I apologize, I don't have my external camera with me, so you just have to see my profile picture.
That's fine. Thank you, Bill. Greer?
My name is Greer. I've been coming to Erace since late 2007, early 2008, and I enjoyed coming every Saturday.
Thank you. Amal?
I've all been coming to Erace since 1997. Thinking about those days that Marion and Beatrice mentioned at the library. So that was my first introduction in that library.
Thank you. Glenn?
My name is Glenn Abdullah. I've been coming to Erace since 1994. And look forward to today's meeting.
Thank you. You moved on my screen. I had to look for you. I brought today's topic due to there's 2 topics actually. They're kind of related, but I couldn't decide which one I wanted to bring. And I couldn't pick one over the other. They both meant quite a bit to me. The Supreme Court's decisions in the last couple of years have been very disheartening and extremely disillusioning in the direction that the country is headed in. Oh, you know what I didn't do? I didn't go over the rules. Let me go back to that. Okay. Everyone keep yourself on mute. Raise one finger to get on the list. You speak in order of the list. You take 2 minutes, okay? I do have a timer for that. Be respectful. We do not interrupt the speaker. We make no side comments and no personal attacks and no name calling. All right, the point of the discussion is to listen, learn, and not argue. You may ask a clarifying question of the speaker. Clarifying question, you raise 2 fingers. All right, it is to ask the speaker to clarify what they said by saying, I didn't understand, or could you further explain what you meant by? And it's not to argue with the person. And there can only be 2 clarifying questions per speaker. Okay, so now we get to the rules of, the reason that I brought the topic was because of the recent Supreme Court decisions, all right? One, I can see those decisions being used to steer or direct the country in the direction that the first article describes. And then I was listening to MSNBC where they talked about if they were going to strike down affirmative action in universities, and because they feel that they are discriminatory against white and Asian students, then why don't you strike down legacy admissions, because that's discriminatory against anyone that's other than being a white student. And I felt, their argument was pretty persuasive. They had good points of, they always have been, but that's always been overlooked because that is for the wealthy and the privileged. So that's why I wanted to bring that article, and I couldn't decide between the 2. So I brought them both, and I'm sure that they can be interrelated and discussed at the same time. We can also, there is no cross-talking. And also if it starts cross-talking, we can say point of order. We will go until around 11:15. There are a lot of people here today, where we go to wrap up, and you get 1 minute for your final thoughts. And if you haven't spoken throughout the meeting, you get a full 2 minutes. So we will begin. Is there anyone that would like to get on the list now? Teresa Stanton. Greer, Marion. Okay. Marion, you can go ahead, Teresa. Glenn. Greer.
Okay, I was actually looking up a book. I didn't know I was going to be first. But the book I was going to recommend was called When Affirmative Action Was White. I may have mentioned this book before, but I wanted to do it again because this just reminded me of, when affirmative action benefits white people, it's never called that. But I hope that what I just put in the chat is a link to that book. But it was just really pivotal for me. It's almost like when Fox News accuses everybody else of talking about identity politics when the identity is not a white male, and I'm not meaning the white male bash, but very clearly they are also guilty of identity politics. They are also guilty of, and this whole thing of color blindness. And I like, what is it? D.H. Hughley's book, How Not to Get Shot and Other Advice That White People Tell Me. It's just like you say you're colorblind, but you definitely see color when you're calling the police. And for people who say that they're colorblind, I would love to put them to the challenge of, do you not see color? Do you not notice when you're the only white person in the room? Because that is noticing color, and just our brain does work in discriminating one thing against the other. So to say that some obvious feature of another human being that you're completely oblivious to is disingenuous. So those were my comments. I didn't want to get into the actual muck of the politics except for those comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Next we have Stanton.
Yeah, prior to the meeting, I was looking up capital punishment crimes in the Old Testament. And there are a couple that I just want to read. And one of them is adultery for a married woman and her lover, bestiality, blasphemy, child sacrifice, false prophecy, male homosexual relations. And then there's one that's proselytizing and promoting other religions. There's also one about a woman who lies about her virginity prior to marriage. These are all crimes punishable by death in the Old Testament. So my question to myself is, well, if I'm a deeply religious Jew and I have these deeply held religious beliefs like they talked about in the Supreme Court ruling, would it be okay if I put up a sign in my storefront that said I do not serve Christians, Muslims, or anyone other than someone of the Jewish faith, because I have a deeply held religious belief that proselytizing or promoting other religions is against my religious beliefs? So I don't think that would fly in the United States. And this whole notion that because you have a personally held religious belief allows you to discriminate against another group or class of people, to me, that is an abomination. And the fact that the Supreme Court likes to hold on to those deeply held religious belief words, there are so many arguments that one can make against those philosophies. And if you have your deeply held religious beliefs, keep them to yourself, pray in your home, practice religion freely, but you can't discriminate.
Thank you. Thank you, Stanton. Next we have Marion.
I found this article very alarming, and I'm not ashamed to admit that I'm feeling afraid. I've lived long enough to have seen some horrible things as a child and as an adult. And I shared with you, this group, the time that my uncle was murdered by the Ku Klux Klan. And I don't think I'm being extreme or paranoid to believe that I think those days are going to be coming back. There was a paragraph in this article that said, well, women, we're going back to a time when women are going to be kept silent, gay people are going to be fired and arrested from their jobs, and when Black people face severe discrimination, violence such as lynching. And that's what I'm afraid it's coming to think that people who hold the highest position, such as the Supreme Court, would start taking away rights that all human beings are supposed to have. And I'll say it again, I am very, very afraid. I am terrified that very hideous things have happened. We've had the people in Buffalo being murdered in the supermarket, people in churches, Jewish people and Black people being murdered in houses of worship. And I'm afraid there are people in this country that want the clock hands to be turned back, the calendar to be turned back to the year 1863. I'm afraid that day is coming.
Thank you, Marion.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
Yes. You said that you were afraid, and you're afraid that we'll be going back to a time like when I believe you said your uncle was lynched.
Phyllis.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me. My question is, when was there a time that we left those times?
It really wasn't about. I haven't deceived myself into believing that everything was all hunky dory, but it was sort of under the rug. I'll say that. But now it's going to hit us full blast, and I think it's going to be a point where we're actually going to have to maybe hide in our homes and not come out. It's just so blatant now, and it's something that bothers. And you're right. There never was a time, but as I said, it was sort of undercover, under the rug. but now it's going to hit us full blast. And I say I'm not ashamed to admit I'm terrified.
Thank you, Marion. Next we have Glenn.
Nancy, am I on your list?
Yes. You're right after Glenn. Glenn? Oh, there you go.
Well, you know, I think when the Supreme Court went on that decision that because of a person's religious belief, they don't have to sell to somebody, I think they should have just passed on it. And left it up to people to sue a particular business if they didn't, and had that business defend itself why it did it, and let the court decide, you know, that it may have been right. Let's say, for instance, there was a time when a business would refuse you if you didn't come into their place with a shirt on. And they still got certain things. You know, you have to, certain places you go to eat, you have to have a coat and tie on. So there are still things where you can refuse. Now let's take, for instance, if somebody I know who's a book burner, he burns Holy Qurans, and he's coming to my store to buy a case of Quran. I would refuse him based on religion. I would refuse him. Now on the court siding with abortion, going against abortion, I agree with the court. It's not, but it's murder. What they're doing is murder. I agree with the court. Now that's I hope I ain't hurt nobody's feelings by saying that. You know
Finished?
how sensitive we are. Yeah, I'm finished.
Okay, Greer.
The one thing no one's talking about in this is we're talking about affirmative action. They're not trying to outroot it across the board. They just want to relegate it to colleges or universities. But the thing was, with affirmative action, there's always a financial aspect where people have benefited. Mind you, with affirmative action, it didn't mean that you would get a job. It didn't mean what job you would get. It just meant you had the opportunity. And companies benefit from having minorities working at their facility. Say you have 1,000 employees and you hire, say, 200, and they're all in housekeeping. That company is going to benefit from that. And we have like Walmart and McDonald's who hire the most people who have to use welfare. So that's double dipping. They're getting money for hiring these people who are minorities, while also these people have to use tax dollars to subsidize their welfare. There's no altruism in it. Every choice that's made to where we benefit, either someone else benefits financially or physically, but it's never to benefit us. But again, they're limited this to colleges. If you're going to take and do this, do it across the board and stop giving corporate welfare to all these companies. That's it.
Thank you, Greer. Next we have Beatrice.
First thing, I agree with Glenn that the court did not have to take this case. First of all, it's a hypothetical. The woman nobody had contacted this woman to make a website for them. The person that she claimed contacted her in her brief that she filed, the phone number belonged to somebody who was married and had children. The whole thing is based on a hypothetical case. And they're not, like this article says, when these people were being tested by the Senate for their positions, they wouldn't answer hypotheticals because Mitch McConnell advised against it. So that's one thing. I disagree about the Dobbs decision. I think that was a poor way to make a decision because abortion not being listed in the Constitution. The whole idea of originalism is something that people need to kind of review and think about. This needs to be a living document. The other thing is that our Supreme Court is too small. Germany has 16 people on its Supreme Court. India has 33. And there are term limits. We are going to be bothered with these people for the rest of their lives. And they are turning back the clock on everything. If we don't turn around, like the article indicates, Robert seems to be completely against anything related to race, to voting. Thankfully, they didn't fool around with that Alabama issue, but they're on there too long. There are no ethics requirements. They can go out with anybody they want to on any vote. And Clarence Thomas is a damaged person. If you look at the history of his life from childhood, this is a damaged person. People used to talk about him because of his color. He got hurt when he was a little boy by people calling him ABC, America's Blackest Child. I mean, to me, that is the main issue, that we have some people, 9 people who are making major decisions, and they're on there for the rest of their lives. And they have no.
Okay, thank
I said
you.
something that hurt Glenn. He had to speak.
Yes, I know. He has 3 fingers up. Okay, Glenn, what hurt your feelings?
Talking about my favorite Supreme Court say that he's damaged. He's a damaged individual. I think that's attacking. That's what against the rules, right? Attacking someone.
Well, there's not somebody here that they're attacking. That's what that rule means.
Well, I was hurt by it
a personal attack.
I'm hurt
That's
by
what it means.
I was hurt by it. No matter what, I was still hurt by it.
Because you, okay, well,
Yeah,
right,
I'm sorry.
you're hurt.
I'm sorry that you identify with him, and I hurt your feelings by talking about his history.
Okay, we have Leonetta, Bill, Phyllis, Glenn, and Greer. Is there anyone else that would like to be on the list? Anybody? Jean and Becky. Okay, Leonetta.
Yes, I was going
to. And Stanton. Okay.
Bill, just thank you for bringing it up that about the Supreme Court that with that case that it wasn't even a
real case.
A customer, that she was a made up customer. Thank you for bringing that up. But I agree with you, that I am afraid. I took out my Constitution and looked at the about the freeing of the slavery. I am worried about the Supreme Court. Miriam mentioned about the lynching. I am worried about slavery coming back. She's worried about the lynching. I'm worried about slavery coming back. I am worried about the Supreme Court. People, I think every child in they take. I am worried that I think that all children should learn civics. People are not learning about civics. I think it's important that we need. Everybody should know what's going on with government. We are living in scary times. What's going on with our government? Our government is changing, and it's changing to something that's unrecognizable. And everybody needs to be aware of this. What's going on nationally, and also in the state of Louisiana is scary. And people need to pay attention because things are not right. And it's very scary. Our rights are being taken away from us, and things that the clock, like Miriam said, is going back, and it's going back to a time that's not good.
Okay, thank you, Leonetta. Next we have Bill.
Yeah, say several things.
Pedro.
Colorblind is, you say you're colorblind, that means you want the status quo to remain. It was, as fast as it was not acceptable. But more importantly, not more importantly, but equally important, Supreme Court is imposing their religious beliefs on the rest of us. They're imposing their deeply held religious beliefs on the rest of us. I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, a rabbi said, according to my religion, life begins at the first breath and ends at the last breath. So ruling against abortion violates my religion. And as someone said, I think it was Stanton actually, who said, the only deeply held religious beliefs are white Christian beliefs, and not they're discriminating against everyone else. So, and the Supreme Court is above the law, and the several Supreme Courts have engaged in illegal behavior. They could be prosecuted for it if it's not Supreme Court justice. They'd be prosecuted. So the Supreme Court is very corrupt. It's imposing their religious beliefs on the rest of us. And there should be consequences for that. Also, I want to say on a better note, it's nice to see Walterine.
It is. Bill, do you want to get back on the list?
No, I listened for a while. I just want to say Walterine and her husband, Dennis, are the reason why he joined Erace. It was nice to see her back.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Next, we have Phyllis.
Well, a couple things. In the paragraph that somebody else was quoting, where it talks about taking us back to a time and place where women suffered mightily in silence, et cetera, et cetera. I was listening to an interview this week. Samantha Bee on her podcast was interviewing the author Judy Blume. Everybody know who she is? Yeah. And one of the things Judy Blume said was that in 1960, she was maybe a couple years into her marriage, and her husband was a supporter of Richard Nixon, and he expected her to, because obviously he had a full-time job and she was a stay-at-home woman, that he expected her to volunteer with the Nixon campaign and go around spreading the information. She didn't make it clear that she actually did that, but she did talk about the freedom that she felt when she went into the voting booth and cast a vote for John Kennedy. And she realized that that was, you know, she had the ability to make her own decisions. And I think that's something that a lot of people today don't know about, that history. And I know there's still women today who think they have to vote the way their husbands tell them to, and I'd be like, no. But I think we really, that's what I would say almost every meeting, we all are a target for the current conservative movement in this country. There's no group left out except for the very ultra wealthy white hetero men. Those who support them, who aren't that, are gonna be rudely awakened at some point when they see that they're not gonna be brought into the fold. I will
Phyllis,
wait.
would you like to get back on the list?
I'll wait and see. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Glenn.
Yeah, and the Ace questions like this, like why aren't they why aren't the colleges allowing the rich kids to get in because they know somebody. Uh, 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 the reason why, if something is unconstitutional or unfair, well, you got the right to bring it before the Supreme Court. Anybody can bring it before the Supreme Court. If you're wondering why they ain't never done anything about it, because you never press any charges. When Rosa Parks was riding on that bus, it was a strategy that she would go to the Supreme Court with her argument. She brought that argument to the Supreme Court. If you don't ever bring your argument to the court, don't expect no change. It's open to you like it's open to everybody else. Stop talking about what they're doing and what you don't like, the unfairness, and you're not doing nothing against it. That's it. Yeah.
Thank you. Next we have Greer. Greer?
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to say this. White women have continually stood by white men in wrongdoing and even aided them in it. The test case for this case right here was Abigail Fisher case, trying to get into the University of Texas at Austin because she didn't have the grades, she didn't have the SAT score or anything, but she felt she was not let in because minorities got in. But there were also white students who had lower grades than she had that got in provisionally. And after she went through all that, she winds up going to LSU. So my thing is, why, if that's where you wanted to go, but yet you wind up going to LSU. And like all these women who are supporting Trump, I'm like, you're supporting things against you. And as far as Thomas is concerned, all he's looking to do is get his monetary, I forgot how you say it. God, since the COVID, my mind is just his manumission from doing what these white folks say and going along with every wrongdoing that they did, though he benefited from affirmative action. But see, this is the thing. He's so warped in his mind worrying about what everybody else thinks about him. Affirmative action doesn't guarantee you anything. You can get into a college with affirmative action, but your hard work, your diligence, your studying gets you through to graduate. So basically what you did was made that choice a good choice.
All right, thank you.
Can I say one more thing right quick?
Well, yes.
Ginsburg should have got off the Supreme Court so somebody else could have got that.
All right, Glenn, what hurt your feelings this time? Bill?
Oh, she said that Clarence Farmers has a warped mind. He has a
He
warped
does.
mind. Yeah,
Okay.
I personally.
He does, but
Huh?
okay, I said he does.
What?
All right, so, okay, you've been heard.
I have a question, clarifying question.
You have a clarifying? Okay, Bill, what is your clarifying?
Greer, did Clarence Thomas benefit from affirmative action himself?
Yes, he did. He benefited from affirmative action for the point that he got a chance. The chance does not guarantee you completion. If somebody gets into college for affirmative action, if you don't do the work and graduate, the affirmative action didn't guarantee you anything. You still have to do the work. It's not like minorities are going to college and just they're saying, here you go, you get a degree, you're free, you ain't got to do nothing with it. And that's how they're selling affirmative action, as though we're being given something and not having to give something back in return. That's it.
Thank you. Next, we have Jean.
Let me talk about how things are coming at the local level. We have last week had a series of hate crimes on my street. They tore down and burned LGBTQ pride flags, and also flags dealing with Ukraine and other symbols that people had in front of their houses, like, you know, this is a warm and welcoming house and things. And they burned those, destroyed those. They're still looking for the culprits. And as a response to that, we have 2 pride flags in front of our house now. And there are many pride flags on the street now that weren't there before. We do have many couples. And we've always been a really warm and welcoming neighborhood. And there's hate that's just being spread out amongst the communities, apparently. So keep everybody watching.
Okay, thank you, Jean. Next, we have Becky.
Good morning.
And Greer.
Sorry, I was late.
It's okay.
Joining. I wondered, it is terrible what people of color are faced with. It's horrible. And I am really glad to hear about the neighborhood that helped and supported the gay pride people. But I'm wondering if it's going to make any difference that the military is going to remain integrated. I'm sure because they can't afford not to. But it means that ROTC at places like Harvard, there will be a lot of people of color, I'm sure. And is that going to help in any way? And what about state colleges accept people on the basis of low income? And I would think that's going to be pretty representative, and especially state colleges that also have ROTC or other military groups. I don't know if there are other groups besides ROTC that will remain integrated. I was just wondering if that was a little hopeful sign. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. This is who we have on the list now. We have Stanton, Amal, Pedro, Greer, Phyllis, Beatrice, and Walterine. Is there anyone else that would like to be on the list? Stephanie. Okay, Stanton.
Yeah, I want to go back to discrimination and what a tricky thing that can be. I agree with Glenn that there are restaurants that require a coat and a tie, and there are places that will not serve if you're not wearing a shirt. But it would be different if a restaurant only required Black patrons to wear a coat and a tie and didn't require anyone other than a Black patron to do that, or it required a Black patron to wear a shirt and no other patrons. So it's slippery and it's dangerous, and what one considers discriminatory versus what one's personal beliefs are, they're always rubbing against one another. And I understand not wanting to sell a Quran to someone who's a known Quran burner, but then what happens when somebody walks into a white establishment with a Black Lives Matter button on, and the white business owner doesn't like Black Lives Matter movement? And so it's free speech and discrimination, and who's a protected class and who's not a protected class. And it just becomes a case-by-case basis to some degree. And I think there is some validity in not having to serve certain types of patrons that you may not agree with, but then you just open up a whole hornet's nest as to who you do business with and who you don't. And it becomes a really complicated world in which we would live. That's it.
Thank you. Next, we have Amal.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes, great article. This is probably one of the best ones I've seen in a long time. Interestingly enough, somewhere in the article it mentioned it's like we're going back to 50 years ago, and my position is we never left. Um, I've everything, all of these things that we are seeing that are under attack, voting rights, now affirmative action, and so on and so forth. These things have been under attack since they came into existence. So it's not like we're going back to anything. We just never left those things, and now it's coming to a head to a point to where people are starting to really physically see it. It's sometimes you got to put something in somebody's face for them to really understand it and understand that that thing was never yours in the beginning. Affirmative action has never been for Black people first and foremost, because I think sometimes we have an argument about affirmative action in terms of how it discriminates against white people and benefit Black people. First and foremost, white women are the main beneficiaries of affirmative action. So this idea that Black people are somehow taking college admissions from white people is a farce, because we don't benefit at the majority level of affirmative action. White women do. So that's a misconception. So like I say, 50 years ago, 70 years ago, however far back you want to go, we've never left those times. We're still in them. It's just that things are coming to a head. As far as the something Stanton said, as far as being able to discriminate against people, and I agree with you, Stan, that if you are a religious practicing Jewish person and you want to not do business with other people that's not of your faith, you should have a right in the United States of America to do that. Now, I think that's bad business on your part, but at the same time, I don't think the government should be able to come in and force you to do business with people that you choose not to, because I don't want to give the government that type of power over you for making a personal decision about your business.
Thank you, Amal. Okay, next we have Pedro.
Yeah, that's a great article, a lot of stuff. Let me just jump into it. I think the main thing that really is important to me is that we have a culture that is not just run by wealth inequality and dominates all of these spheres, but it promotes hate. You know, it promotes division and hate, because when you promote hate, it distracts you from the real issues. And when you look at these advantages that wealthy have over everyone else, these things to level the playing field are important, but you can see that once again, wealth will prevail by neutralizing them through lawfare, through an entity that creates laws to reverse laws that sought to even the playing field. So I think that's one thing. I think the other thing I wanted to share was that in 2015, the hate issue really came through against Russia with James Clapper, when he told NBC's Chuck Todd that Russians are genetically driven to co-opt. And his exact words were, if you put that in context of everything else we knew about the Russians, he talked about Russians interfered with the 2016 elections, which of course has never been proven. He said, just the historical practice of the Russians, who typically are almost genetically driven to co-opt, penetrate, gain favor, whatever, which is a typical Russian technique. So we were concerned. So this guy, who is former director of our national intelligence, has unchallenged this type of position, which really is xenophobic. All of these characteristics can be applied to any group or selective.
Would you like to get back on the list?
Yeah, sure. I'll get back on.
Okay. We have Greer, Phyllis, Beatrice, Walter Ring, Stephanie, Glenn, Bill, and then Pedro. Okay. Greer.
any revolt or revolution or uprising that ever happened during slavery was always thwarted by one of the slaves who was working towards their meritorious manumission. That's what I meant to say about Clarence Thomas. He wants to please white people. He's benefited off of siding with white people against his own people. And like I said again, whenever there was a change like integration, it was a fiscal move more than it was a move of morality or this is the right thing to do. They never wanted us, but they always wanted our green dollars. And what the Supreme Court never addressed in of affirmative action is, why was it created and have those reasons disappeared? That's the one thing nobody's talking about. So everything is great and lovely in the world so that we don't need it no more. Everything is perfect. They've drank the Kool-Aid and we're going to suffer.
Thank you. Okay, we have a lot of people. It is 10:55 and we have a lot of people on here. We have Phyllis, Beatrice, Walterine, Stephanie, Glenn, Bill, Pedro, and Leonetta. So I'm going to like cut it off and see where we are when we get to the end of Leonetta. I'm sure we
You could take me off the list.
Who, Leonetta?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, then we'll end with Pedro again. Okay. And the people that I have that have not spoken are Marva, Cindy, Louise, and Marla. If any of you would like to say something
Hi.
before we get to the wrap.
Nancy.
Yes.
That comment is easily fit in 1 minute, so take me off the list.
Your comment will fit in 1 minute. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So next we have Phyllis.
I just want to address that the effects of what the Supreme Court did in the Dobbs decision has actually endangered the lives of many, many women in this country because doctors are afraid to treat them medically when their pregnancies are not viable and they are at risk of sepsis and death. So I don't think that is very pro-life of anybody to support that. And also, many people, religious and otherwise, believe that life does not start when the sperm penetrates an egg inside the woman or birthing person. And I think we have to respect those people too. Muslims don't believe that. Muslims aren't overall as against abortion as the white hetero Christian establishment is. And I think that these conservative people, they just want control over everybody and they don't want to have to be controlled themselves. They want to be able to go out on yachts and do whatever they want and party with whoever they want. And the rest of us need to toe the line. So as always, I encourage people to look deeper into policies that are being promoted to learn something about what the on the ground real life situations are. Thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis. Next we have Beatrice.
I agree with Phyllis about Dobbs and the effects of it, and we do need to look deeper. Teresa mentioned When Affirmative Action Was White. I read that book and she's absolutely correct. I was off looking for it on my shelf. Mao, white women are the main beneficiaries of affirmative action. If we look at, and also to say that not only are we going back to the 50s, but that we've never been there. The difference now is that it's codified. We used to be able to look at the Supreme Court and say, oh, if this case gets to the court, this or this will happen and we'll feel more encouraged. No, we're now at a place where going to the Supreme Court is probably the worst thing that a case can do. If you think about a clock, And all of the time that our people, since we touched these shores, have been discriminated against, maltreated, lynched, killed, burned, worked without pay, separated from families, all that. If you keep that clock, go to Jim Crow, go to when we tried with Reconstruction, keep that clock going, how long it has been, the hand's been going around, and then you get to affirmative action. It's like 5 minutes to 12. I mean, affirmative action to try, Jesse Jackson used to say quotas were fine when the quota was 0 Jews, 0 Blacks, 0. Quotas were fine. No Blacks, no Jews. He used to say that all the time. Now we have affirmative action and attempt to bring the pendulum back, swing it back to intentionally include people that were intentionally excluded at every place. Now, for a minute, it has been in practice, as Lamal said, white women were the beneficiaries, and we're going to give up on it. It's now colorblind. Everything is colorblind. Come on, Roberts. I'm so tired of the arguments. Thank God for Ketanji Jackson's dissent and Sotomayor and the things they said. That's all we have to encourage us. That's why we got to expand that court. But Biden says it's political to expand it. Well, they are political. So we got to do something about it, or we are going to be in deep trouble. I'm with Marion.
It's okay. Thank you, Beatrice. Okay, next we have Walter Ream. She here? There she is.
Yeah, here we go.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. I've been sitting here listening to everybody, and basically you guys have basically said the things that I wanted to say. I'm going to first apologize before I get started, so nobody has to hold up 3 fingers. I feel that Clarence Thomas is, my opinion, is a flawed character, given all the information that they have given for him, about him. Secondly, we're looking at what the Supreme Court is doing now. We have to remember those people on the Supreme Court, not all, are bought and paid for by rich millionaires. And they're going to make a lot of decisions in their favor. And that's what we have to remember. Yeah, a long time ago, we could go to the Supreme Court, but do we really trust the Supreme Court at this point? No. And many of them are not in touch with the people's will. As we see them passing bills, it's not what the people want at all. So we don't even matter. And for me, as a Black person, I'm invisible to people. They don't see me as a person. And it's always been that way. I agree with them all. Things have never changed. We've always been fighting for our rights. We're still fighting. My mother used to say, take 2 steps forward and 4 backwards. And that's where we're going. The other thing too, when you start looking at the things that they're passing, there's more to that. And I don't know, my mind went back to the Southern strategy. This is what they wanted. And you know, the other thing too is, I'm trying to get everything out before my time is up, is that we are not valued as people, and they're going to do what they want. And they always tell us this is their country. I was listening to something on MSNBC, and they were talking about the people for January 6th, what they were saying. They want a white revolution. They want to get rid of all of us, people of color. The other thing too, I know I'm out of order. What I'm saying is that each of those cases that the Supreme Court looked at was false cases. There was the person that somebody brought up who talked about not wanting to serve people. There we go. I thought I could get it out fast, but I could.
Well, you can finish it up in the wrap up, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, and next we have Stephanie.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here, for your shares, and for the article. I cried for a couple hours in the morning with the Supreme Court affirmative action decision. My son just applied to colleges, and having a strong Black student population was really important to him. So we actually looked at numbers and percentages for probably 10 or 20 schools, and affirmative action was not really working well. It was hard to find over 2 or 3% of a Black student population when you looked at, you know, Notre Dame and Harvard, Villanova, just some schools. And yet, when we looked at California, Michigan, and some other places that had eliminated affirmative action, it got even worse than those terrible numbers that I just gave. So, and then the article that shared about whatever 43% of white students, and the white student population is massive at all those schools, and that 43% of them are coming in through legacy or through athletic advantages. There is a student at my son's school right now whose barely took any AP classes, and he's getting into Harvard because of lacrosse. He had to take one AP and get a certain grade to be able to qualify for Harvard. So I just went to the Legacy Museum in Montgomery, and it just crushes me to think of what the Black population has endured in history in comparison to these legacy students that have been pampered from day one. I had a confrontation with a family member where she said, "Oh, I don't believe that the Black students should get over the white students that had higher grades and everything." I said, "It's not the Black student population your kid is competing with. Look at all these white kids who have all the APs and all the tutors and all the privileges and all the legacy." And it's just disgusting to me that the Supreme Court went after the tiny percentage of Black students that were there. So I am absolutely heartbroken and really discouraged with where this country and this world is going, and just really grateful to have this group to be able to come to and think of ideas that we can come up with. That's my timer. Thanks.
Thank you. Gosh, you're right on time too. Oh, okay. Yeah. I'd have to honestly say that, this organization and these meetings are extremely therapeutic. I mean, they really, for the last, I've been coming since 2007, and yeah, lifesaver in that regard. Next we have Glenn.
Well, first of all, I just say, since Walter Reed just come back, I'm gonna let her go. I didn't raise my 3 fingers on her. She deserved 3 fingers, but I let her go.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry, I thought I was muted.
All right. Okay, now, I think our country is going in the right direction. And look at that. It's true. We are going in the right direction. We caught an insurrection. Now we know that there are people who want to roll back democracy, who wants to take away the democracy. And we didn't put about 1,000 people in jail that were in that insurrection at Washington. We're going after Trump and all his dominion. And we're going to be making new laws and new rules that somebody like him can't come in and cause a resurrection. And just that since things have been exposed, now that we're going to do things about things that we was unaware. We don't know how close we came to having a Putin over us in America. So no, we heading in the right direction. We're not heading in the wrong direction. And I disagree that we need more Supreme Court judges. Just when our turn comes, we'll vote somebody in, to create the balance. But every time that somebody, my time must be up. The bell rung yet?
8 seconds.
All right. Every time, if somebody the Republicans get in, then they'll vote on. They'll say, "Well, you had 5. You added
up.
5 to the Supreme Court. Now we're going to add 10 to the Supreme Court."
You'll
never catch up.
Okay. Well, thank you. You do realize the next time that there's a Supreme Court opening, you probably will not be around. You do realize that, right?
Well, I'll be around.
Oh, okay, Richard. You're going to be immortal? You're going to be like a cockroach? You're never going to die? Okay. Anyway, next we have Pedro, and then we move on to the wrap up.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, just a couple of things to finish up my rant. I apologize for that, but it's just outrageous to me. In fact, in the chat, I posted a show recently. I had the great privilege of interviewing a gay friend of mine that's a little bit older than me. He's been through decades and decades of experiences. It's a really powerful show if you want to check it out. The links are there if you want. But also, I just wanted to indicate with this point that was made about corporate welfare is really important, because corporate welfare stunts the amount of monies that are put into other forms of welfare, but it doesn't get any coverage, because who controls what we see and read are are literally, like 6 corporations own like 90% of the information outside of the internet that we see on TV and talk shows and et cetera, et cetera. So that's really worth kind of pointing out, that if you want to eliminate welfare, well, we should eliminate all welfare. And when you do that, there'll be pushback by the corporate side. The other thing I wanted to indicate is that, Glenn indicated how you could file a lawsuit. Well, lawsuits cost money. And again, that's what the lawfare thing is about. There are situations where there is great pushback against the owners of mines that blatantly were crossing the lines of laws, federal laws, but they would just go to court and they'd be continue to operate under the aegis of the federal law protection until it got appealed after appealed. And when they ran out, smaller companies, those smaller companies filed lawsuits and they got run out because they just ran out of money. So anyhow, thank you for a great discussion. I'll pass on my 1 minute since I just
No,
completed.
you don't have to pass, but okay. It is 11:10, which is a good time to start our final wrap up. The 4 people that haven't spoken at all are Marva, Cindy, Louise, and Marla. I hope I didn't miss anybody. So we'll start with Marva with your final thoughts.
Good discussion, good order, Nancy. I listen to everybody's thoughts and verbalization, and I think it was noteworthy. And I learned something every time I attended Erace discussion, and left feeling enlightened. Thank you all.
Oh, thank you, Marva. Next we have Cindy. Is Cindy?
This is
there?
An example of a very complex issue. And I don't think there are clear, simple answers. I think when you look at discrimination, it's certainly widespread. Lots of biases out there. And how do we fight it? Except by dealing with it when it touches us. But then you look at the large, like corporate welfare, good grief. That's more than I feel I can deal with at this point in my life. Maybe I could have tackled it a long time ago. But it's to be aware of the complexity of such issues, and to speak our minds to the people that we know well enough that will hear us. Beyond that, it's bigger than I am. But it's interesting to look at it. So we'll keep looking. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Next we have Louise.
I agree with obviously what most people have been saying today, and I do feel also very pessimistic about the future. But something that Greer said, that getting into college was one thing, but you have to put in some real hard work. And I think, again, yeah, you're right. It's a misconception, just like the critical race theory is. Whenever people hear it, they're just like, oh, that's, they just don't understand it and don't really get it. So I agree with you. Yeah, it's just getting in is one thing, but, getting out with a degree or what doctorate, whatever, is another thing. Also, of course, the Supreme Court justices, they should never have a lifetime job. It's ridiculous. And we should have more. I totally agree with that also. And I think that was pretty much it. It was great listening to y'all.
Thank you, Bees. And we have Marla.
Yeah, enjoyed listening to what everybody had to say. I've read a few things over this last couple of weeks that Frederick Joseph in particular has talked about. And I think he really hits the nail on the head so much with this. He talks about how the white opposition of affirmative action just really shows and further reveals the tremendous disconnect white folks have between individual experiences and understanding those and what systemic realities are. And I think that summed it up for me a lot, and that, you know, as people in the United States, we continue to harp and pride ourselves on individualism, which, you know, again, I think there's nuance here. We can have individualism, but we also need to focus on community and you know, I don't want to say the collective, that sounds so whatever, it's like the buzzword, but community and caring for one another. And I don't know who said it, but somebody said, if you don't think representation matters, then chances are you are well represented. And very true. Anyway, that's it. Thanks. I appreciate all the comments.
Okay, thank you, Marla. Okay, next we'll move on to our one person, 1 minute wrap-ups. Okay, and I'll call you in the order that I see you on the screen again. Okay, so Phyllis, we'll start with Phyllis.
Thanks, Nancy, for these articles and for facilitating the conversation about them. I agree with those who said that, you know, things are not heading in a positive direction and that we all need to be afraid, and we also need to have each other's backs and protect each other. Thank you.
We do. Okay, Marion.
This is a very timely article. It was a great article. I appreciated everyone's comments. And again, I'll repeat that I'm terrified. Also, a warning, gird your loins, prepare for battle, because this is going to be a mess. Thanks again, Nancy.
Okay, thank you, Marion. Beatrice.
Thanks for the articles and everyone for the great conversation, good information, good sharing. Gigi, I agree with you. I think RBG thought she was immortal, and God, if she had just resigned, Lord have mercy. But it was a great conversation. I'm still in favor of a larger Supreme Court, and I'm in favor of term limits and in favor of people of ethics requirements for these people up here who think they are God. Great discussion. Great to see all of y'all. Have a good summer. We are reading How the Word Was Passed in our Atlanta group. That's what we're doing for the summer. If y'all haven't read, it might be good. Thanks, Nancy, for your wonderful facilitating. Love y'all.
Love you too, Beatrice. Walterine.
I really enjoyed this meeting. I was glad to come back and to see everybody. As far as everything else, I agree with mostly everything everybody said. But I think too, we need to look at the Supreme Court a little bit more deep as far as the things that they're passing. It may be for one group, but it's going to trickle down to the rest of us. Just as we sit and watch, you're going to see more things being taken away from us. I agree. As I never really had freedom in this country, to be honest with you. It was a very false sense of security or freedom. But anyway, it was really good. I want to say one thing. I went to college on affirmative action, but I had to work to stay there. Nothing was given to me. They gave me the chance to come in, but I had to put the work because really they were watching you. We had to work harder than some of the white students, and because I went to a white university. So anybody who thinks it's easy with affirmative, that was easy for us with affirmative action, you don't know what you're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Walterine. Jean. Jean?
I'm sorry, I'm having problems with my hearing these days, as well as my heart. So, well, it was an excellent article, and I really agree that it was stolen from us because he blocked Barack Obama from appointing anybody to the Supreme Court. And so he's got what he wished, you know, the divided society. And we've just got to, as somebody else has mentioned, go to the polls and make sure that we vote, do the best we can to keep our democracy going. This is not easy times, that's for sure. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jean. Leonetta?
Nancy, a wonderful article. Like I had mentioned earlier, please vote. Vote like your life depends on it. And I just want to remind everybody, if you look at the history of the United States, wherever Blacks have made strides, there was always a backlash. You look at Reconstruction, there was Jim Crow. The civil rights, there was the Klan. So we had a Barack Obama, now we have Trump. So there was always a backlash. So we're living in backlash times now. And I hope the backlash will not, my fear will not come to fruition, and that would be slavery coming back. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonetta. Stanton?
Yeah, I've been thinking about the street signs with parking restrictions that when you sometimes see there's like 15 street signs about all the parking regulations. I'm looking forward to the day where business will say, we reserve the right to refuse service to those who've had an abortion, a divorce, an extramarital affair, a gay college experience, and just the list can go on and on and on. And by the time you read the exhaustive list, you're too tired to enter the store.
Thank you, Stanton. Stephanie?
Yes, I just wanted to thank all of you for being here and for your shares. My son did consider HBCU and would have been honored to go. He wasn't real sure if he would be welcomed or not. There were articles kind of on both sides, but he ended up picking the school that had the highest Black population that he applied to, which was UGA. And when we went for orientation, the orientation class had major LGBTQ representation, Black representation. It was extremely diverse. And they did a whole skit, which was so vulnerable, where people came up and shared their stories, and they talked about microaggressions, and they said, not here, not today, not on my watch. I was the only one in this huge room that stood up with a standing ovation. So I don't know. I try to have hope. I'm very discouraged and scared. And I think there's so much more hate in this country against minorities than anyone wants to admit. So I continue to be dismayed by people like Pence, who didn't even know about the statistics out there when he's speaking. So just continue to try to show up and see what I can do to help. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Pedro?
Yeah, hey, thanks, Stephanie, for that. It's, you know, one person standing is a lot of people. Good for you. Hey, I just wanted to piggyback on a comment that was, I forget who made it, but it was just talking about, you know, getting into school and, you know, getting a degree does not even get you the leverage it should get if you're an African American. I wanted to end my comment with a quote that education in the 21st century has not been the pathway to wealth equality. In 2015, the heads of households of Black families who graduated from college had about 33% less wealth than white families whose heads dropped out of high school. I am not suggesting to avoid education. It's just impossibly costly. And once you get it, it still is not a guarantee. So that's what kind of covers up the real issues, I think. Thank you for a great discussion.
Thank you, Pedro. Teresa?
Thank you. I'm glad you brought up Mike Pence because he said we didn't need affirmative action because his 3 white kids went to school. Anyway, when I think about raising the number of Supreme Court justices, I just think of the saying, the more the sillier. I don't necessarily, if we raise the number of judges and Mitch McConnell can still work his evil, it really doesn't matter. I think the system needs to change, the process needs to change, not the number of, because 9, I mean, or 12, or how many ever we have, 32, I think the number is arbitrary. I think the process itself needs to change. And I do think, you know, having a 25-year career is long enough. So I'm up for, I definitely think the process and term limits should be the goal. Otherwise, a really good discussion.
Thank you, Teresa. Becky.
Yeah, thank you for the discussion. And I agree about term limits. I think term limits on the Supreme Court would help. And I also agree that it's terrifying what has happened. But I still want to know if the military will make a difference, because they can still admit people from, I guess, anywhere. I guess they have to in order to have enough people. That's why that's happened. But whether it'll make a difference or not, I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Bill?
I want to agree with Nancy first. This was very therapeutic. And our country, I disagree with Glenn. I think our country is headed in the wrong direction. And I'm a very protected class, white, straight male. But I see what's happening in this country and it horrifies me. And I agree with Pedro. The society promotes health. In the 60s, the civil rights movement was pointing us in the right direction. The Nixon Southern strategy focused on promoting health, hate. That took us in the wrong direction. We're still going in the wrong direction now. And I want to close, abortion was not, evangelicals didn't see abortion as their issue. After Roe v. Wade, evangelicals started being politicized to avoid school integration. And when the schools are integrated, they were searching for a new issue, wedge issue. They picked abortion. It was consciously picked as a political wedge issue, not because of religious beliefs. So thanks for everyone. We miss you while we were away. We'll be home in New Orleans next Saturday. And we'll certainly be with you all the rest of the month of July. Thanks for Nancy for a great article.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, that screen is moved around, but I think next is Greer.
I've always said since I've been attending these meetings that racism is a virus. When we make it mutes to nullify it. And I'm going to say another thing. I was discussing this with a friend, and this is what I told him. I said, white men let white women be liberated. And then they turned around and claimed liberation by co-opting white womanhood, now that they can become women. That is something that is, to me, I consider it sinister. Because I'm not saying everybody's doing it, but there is some trepidation and there is some, let me see what the word I want to use. There is a political agenda behind changing sexes. Everything is not as copacetic as we think it. People look out. That's it.
Thank you, Greer. Leonetta?
Yes, I had my turn.
You did? Okay,
Yeah.
the screen keeps changing, so I'm like, sometimes everybody's all over the place now, so I'm trying to remember who was where. Okay, Amal is next then.
Yeah, great article. Thinking about the to the white people on the panel who say that you know, they're scared and discouraged, and that these recent Supreme Court decisions have made them feel a certain type of way. I want to tell them to welcome to being Black in the United States. This is how we feel all the time, because we never feel encouraged by the things that we see as it relates to the politics of this country. So that's the feeling. That feeling that you're feeling in the moment of being discouraged or fearful or lacking hope for the future. That's what it feels like to be Black in America. When you just don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. That's that feeling. I was thinking about the Montgomery bus boycott and what it was like to be paying equal fare but not being able to sit where you want to sit. The simple remedy was don't ride the bus. And when you don't ride the bus, you hit white folks in their pocket where it really hurts, where it really matters. And that's the idea that I have for those businesses that say they don't want to admit certain people. Just don't go and tell all of your friends that, hey, we're not welcome over here, and see how that helps that business long term.
Thank you, Amal. And then last but not least, we have Glenn. See, I saved you for last. You're always saying I'm discriminating against you. I
Oh,
saved
you
you
know
so
you
you could
do.
have the last word. There you go.
Well, reason I am so optimistic about what's going on in America, first of all, I believe in God and I believe in the truth. I believe that truth will knock out the brain of falsehood. That's my scripture says. And oh yeah, and I have a healthy dose of patriotism. I feel very patriotic towards the Constitution in America. And I see our future, the future is going to be more, standing more for what the Constitution stands for. That's it.
Okay. Well, thank you. It's 11:32, so I will not be long. First, I see Stanton. You have a clarifying. We really don't have clarifying questions, but
Well, it's actually just, I want to make sure you repeat the dates we're not meeting again. That's all I wanted to ask.
okay. After this, we will. I just wanted, first of all, I want to give credit to Phyllis for the first article because she brought that article to me and I was like, oh, this is great. And then I was listening to MSNBC and heard about they want to bring a case about the discrimination with the legacy admissions. So I said, well, I don't want to leave that out either, because I don't know a chance when we get back to it. So that's it. But I wanted to give her credit for that. Also, couple of things I heard. I think Marla mentioned about systemic reality when it comes to affirmative action. And I've heard the argument from other people about, well, you don't need affirmative action anymore. And I always say, yeah, well, Black people have caught up, they think everything's equal. Well, things are better, but they definitely are not equal. It's not even equitable, really. In a lot of instances, there was a segment, I always get these two mixed up, CBS Sunday Morning or 60 Minutes, about diversity in the military. And 20 years ago, the upper echelons, even though they have the Secretary of Defense, Mr. Austin, is Black, the upper echelons of the military are still predominantly white. And 20 years ago, they were given a directive to diversify their upper echelons, and they took like a a chart of the racial breakdown 20 years ago and the racial breakdown now, and it was the same. It hadn't changed at all in 20 years. And so they asked him, well, what went wrong? What happened? And he said, all I can say is that ducks hire ducks. And that's true. There is an implicit and unconscious bias in the hiring practices. You're going to hire somebody who you feel comfortable with, who you think you can get along with, that you have something in common with. And that's just the reality of the situation. And that's why you still need affirmative action. Which also brings me to something else that was said about the fallacy of education. You know, we were fed for the longest time, meaning Black people, that all you got to do is get an education and everything's going to be all right. Well, no, everything is not all right. All you do is end up with a lot of debt that you got to pay off. All right. And if nobody will give you still won't give you a job, how are you going to pay off the debt? So I see a lot of people who have put all their eggs into the basket, say, of going to Tulane, where they thought they were going to get a good education and therefore come out with this really good job, only to end up as a receptionist or an administrative assistant where they're not really making, and they're struggling to pay off this high Tulane debt. Okay. So got to think about that too. And lastly, I want to say, and I know Glenn will throw up his three fingers. You really, I know Quinn used to come in with his Clarence Thomas autobiography. I've read both of them, the biography and the autobiography. I think they are both a very interesting read. I suggest, if you have the time to do it in our 2 months off, is to read the biography first and read the autobiography second, so you can compare them and realize that some of these things that he addresses, you know, he is full of it. I mean, truly full of it. And lastly, about Clarence Thomas, I saw a meme, I can't remember if it was on Facebook or it was on Instagram, it was on one of them, and they said, I hope when in the afterlife, when Thurgood Marshall meets Clarence Thomas, he whoops his ass. And and I totally agree. All right.
Absolutely, I agree.
Absolutely. So have a great see you in September. I think there's a song like that. See you in September. We'll see you in September. And you can stop recording and